where Jesus, here you go, Gene. Where Jesus replies, this kind can only come out by prayer. So in the earliest versions of Matthew, that's not in there, but it's in Mark's story. And remember, they believe that Mark came first, and then Matthew wrote things in addition to what Mark had. So there you go, Gene, you were right on.
She knows her Bible.
That's right. That's right.
This so thoroughly and missed that there was no 21.
Yeah.
We don't have a 21 in this one.
No, it goes from 20 to 22. What's that all about?
Yeah.
And that's some earlier versions of Matthew just don't have it.
They just left it out?
Yeah, and the later versions have it. So remember, we don't have a full, complete Bible anywhere. We have bits and pieces. And that's one of the problems of the Bible. Even though there's so many copies out there, none of them are complete. So, what you gonna do? But we still have more copies of the Bible than we have of any other ancient writings. So, we know it's there. Then Jesus predicts his death a second time. No special notes there. It's just Jesus telling them this is going to happen. And of course the disciples were upset. The temple tax. So Jesus gets back to Capernaum, his new adopted home, and the collectors of the 2 drachma temple tax came to Peter and says, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? Now the tax, this story here is only mentioned in Matthew, not the other 3 Gospels, and they figure, well, Matthew was a tax collector, so he would understand the process. The temple tax goes back to the Old Testament, where the people were supposed to provide for the temple.
The priests.
And the upkeep of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're talking about here, though, the 2 drachma tax, the 2 drachma temple tax, that was a tax that the Romans put on the Jewish people to pay for one of their temples. So this was a really unpopular tax. And that's another reason why tax collectors were unpopular with the regular Jewish people, because they were doing the work of the Romans. And the amazing thing is, Jesus isn't even out there to hear this discussion. So Peter comes back into the house in verse 25, and Jesus starts questioning right away. He says, from who do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children, or from others? So Jesus, being God, knows the conversation that Peter had with the Romans, even though he wasn't there. And then Jesus says, the children of the king are exempt. So he felt that he didn't really have to pay the tax, but in order to keep the peace, he did. But how does Jesus get the tax money?
Ow.
What, Gene?
Fish.
In a fish's mouth.
Yeah. Jesus, even for the simplest things, Jesus does a miracle. He says, okay, Peter, go catch this fish, and in this fish, you're going to find enough coins to pay the tax for you and me.
Gosh, I didn't know this.
Yeah, he just didn't reach in his pocket and give him the money. And that just goes, it's just further proof that God provides everything we need when we need it. I think it's amazing. And we'll have to see in The Chosen if that scene pops up.
Yes.
I think it did. I have a faint memory that it did. Okay. Matthew 18. The greatest in the kingdom of heaven. At that time the disciples came to Jesus and said, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And then Jesus calls a little child to him and places the child among them. And then he said, truly I tell you, remember, whenever we hear truly or verily it means something really important is going to happen. Jesus is going to say something important, and you better listen. So Jesus says, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, why do we have to become like little children? Why do we have to become like little children?
Pure and simple
Steve.
belief, for one.
Wait.
Pure and simple belief. Gene?
Jean?
Yeah, trusting.
Trusting.
They're also very innocent.
Very innocent.
Need to depend on someone.
Dependent on someone. All spot on. And one other reason that we don't know, because we don't treat children like this, back in the day, children were treated as the lowest of the low. So in verse 4, Jesus says, therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child. Remember when Jesus said, the last shall be first? Same thing. So all these things are the way we need to become in order to get into heaven. We have to humble ourselves before God. We have to be dependent on Him. We have to be innocent. We have to believe without even thinking or seeing. And we have to be last. We have to be in the lowest position. So all really good reasons. You guys got them all. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. Once again, Jesus goes towards the least of these. Treat everybody just like you would me. And in verse 6, if anyone causes any one of these little ones to stumble, any one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. And here, Jesus isn't just talking about little ones as in kids. He's talking about new believers. He's saying, if you are a more mature believer, your Christian faith is more mature, don't ever treat a new believer badly. Help them along in their journey. Help them learn more about God, and take a teaching role. Don't abuse them. So Jesus adds another layer onto it. And
Drew, in my study notes,
yeah,
I thought this was good. It says, parents need to protect their children from the influence of the world and Satan. Christian parents must not allow their children to be influenced by ungodly friends. They must be especially careful about what they allow the world to put into their children's minds and hearts by means of public education or the entertainment media.
absolutely. That's probably, well, we see it in our own kids, in Joe and Betsy. Joe going to Madison, while he received a great education, he received a very liberal education. And we can see that impact on him. Betsy, even though she went to a very liberal high school, once she got to University of Wisconsin La Crosse, she saw how crazy those people were acting, and she wanted none of that. So it could be that she spent more time with us. We were able to kind of offset some of the liberal education she received. And some of it could just be her own perceptiveness.
She went to college a liberal and came home a conservative.
Yeah. Yeah. Because she wanted none of that stuff.
No. But yeah, that's true, Jean, because how many times, if you don't bring your child to church or influence them, they just go astray. They don't follow.
Yeah.
Out here now.
Yeah.
Yep, it's tough out there. And verse 8. If your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life maimed or crippled than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into the eternal fire.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, Jesus is saying you don't have to cut off your limbs, but take very seriously the fact that this world can change you. So always stay in the straight and narrow. Even if it would come to something as drastic as cutting off a hand or a foot, that'd be better than being in hell forever. So take it seriously.
Kind of
Don't.
like case of fables, do the right thing or you'll be sorry.
Yeah, there you go. The parable of the wandering sheep. Once again, we see here that there's a verse 11 with no context.
Again.
And some later manuscripts of Matthew have it, but what's missing is the words of Luke chapter 19 verse 10. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. So this verse would, this sentence would read, see that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that their angels in heaven will always see the face of my Father in heaven, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. And that wraps up the whole story of why Jesus came here in the first place, to make sure that all of God's people are saved. And then he goes into the parable of the lost sheep, how God wants that one lost soul so badly that he'll leave the 99, he'll leave them safe, but he'll go out and seek that last one. In the same way, verse 14, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should perish. Once again, proof that God wants everyone to come back to him, and we need to tell everybody we can about the good news of the gospel, that salvation is available.
So the little ones would also be us, right?
Us, yeah, right. He's not really talking about children.
Right.
He's talking about everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Dealing with sin in the church. And this is a very good section for how we need to handle things in the church. It ties in the Old Testament rules from Deuteronomy, how we need to have witnesses with us, not only for our protection, but for to be a witness that what we told the other person is true, and also that we don't falsely accuse people. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so a woman sins against you, that's okay. Okay. So, Jesus tells us in verse 15, if your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. Think of how sometimes people are totally clueless that they've done anything wrong. They might have said something off the cuff, and someone gets upset by it. So what Jesus is saying is, go to them and tell them they did wrong, because sometimes they don't know. And don't go with a big crowd of people, just go by yourself. Because you don't want to embarrass anybody, and also you don't want to embarrass yourself. Because what if you misheard something? And also Jesus is saying, go to the person, don't go to another person and gossip and say, do you know what he did to me? Go right to the person and say, here's what I heard you say. Is it really what you meant to say? And Jesus goes on to say, if he listens to you and says, you know what? That's not what I meant. Or they say, I'm sorry, then it's over. You've solved the problem, you've got your friend back, and nobody sins. But if they will not listen, so you go to them and you say, you upset me, they say, I don't care. Then you need to take one or two more people with you for witnesses and for backup. And this is something I always did when I had to talk to somebody in the office, in the corporate world, or even now. Whenever you're meeting with somebody, you should always have a witness there. And if it's someone from the opposite sex, you need somebody there to make sure that nothing goes wrong and you don't get accused. Every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, and we got that from Deuteronomy.
Jeanette,
Yeah, Jeanette.
People actually do that.
Did people actually do that?
many people do actually do that? I think that's very difficult.
It is very.
I would rather go and tell you and let you confront them than me going and confronting them.
But you know what I would do?
Bring me along,
I would bring you along.
right?
Because if, for example, the example Christy gave, she would come to me and say, "Oh, do you know what this person said? I think you should go talk to them." That's called triangulation. Because,
But
yeah, go ahead.
it's called passing the buck.
Yeah.
That too, that too.
Well, the confrontation part is hard for me.
But that's why you have an intermediary. So I would be there, so you're confronting that person, but it's not going to get out of hand. Because I would be there to control it and say, all right, we're gonna be calm. Here's what Christy thought happened. Is that what you intended? And they would either say yes or no, and then we would just proceed to try to solve the problem. Okay, it's the only way to do it. That's the way I've always done things, and it always works out the best.
Okay.
Otherwise, what you're doing is you're putting me in the middle of your fight.
I don't have a fight. It just, yeah.
Well, or an argument, right?
Right, and right.
Yeah. So Jeanette, a lot of people don't do this, but believe me, it's the right way, and it always works out. Sometimes it's a long meeting. Sometimes people are still upset, but at least you've got a true story most of the time.
It especially pertains to ongoing sin or wrong position, right?
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to, something that should be forgiven and move on.
Absolutely.
Like a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Right.
Hopefully that was cured on the one-on-one.
Yeah, because it happens so often where someone will come in and say, well, you've just got to go talk to this person. I said, no, I'll call them up and we'll talk to this person. And a lot of,
To do that, I don't feel like I would be in a position to do that.
well, and I think you might, because a lot of people look up to you, and I think you could pull it off.
For cover.
Ah, that's me. I would run for cover too.
Well, maybe we'll have a class.
Very difficult.
Pardon?
I just think that's a very difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a skill you learn.
Oh.
It's a skill you learn.
Sometimes for teachers though, you can get a parent and get in a, I've never really had that much trouble, but some did. I was smart enough to say, well, let's have the principal here, maybe he can explain things better,
It's-
to help.
Yeah, and
That way
sometimes
it isn't them, they can't say, oh, she said so-and-so and so-and-so and so.
Sure.
And not be
And-
too
Hey, Wilbur.
in your position.
yeah. Hey, Wilbur.
I just saw you came up on the screen. Sorry.
That's all right. We were late.
Oh,
Okay.
good. Okay.
And what Karen said is sometimes you need somebody higher up to be in the meeting also. So sometimes she would call a principal in so she would have a witness, and that's not a bad idea either.
No, no.
Because you have parents who most of the time are going to side with their kid.
Yeah.
So you need a backup too.
Right, especially as the kid gets older. I was mostly in first grade, and that wasn't too often the case. Had one mother, though, that was, of course, she fought with the principal, too, so.
Sometimes people are going to fight with
There's always gonna
everybody.
be some of those.
Yeah,
And I think that's one of the good things about the Methodist Church. If you have a really good district superintendent, he'll be a good mediary. And he'll be able to back you up.
But
That's if you have a good one.
I was just gonna say, I think one of the hesitations Christians have is not wanting to feel judgmental.
And there's,
And I know, go ahead.
yeah, there's a fine line between judgmental and accountability. Yeah. So what Rich is saying is, if we're judging people, so this guy's got tattoos, so he must be a thug, that's judging people. If somebody was going to if a teenager was going to get a tattoo, they're not really sure what they're doing, and we would want to hold that person accountable.
Yeah.
So fine line.
Look, just for example, the epitome of an ugly example, you've got a couple in the congregation that are definitely gay and living together
Mm-hmm.
in the Methodist Church. Maybe I shouldn't even bring it up.
No, that's okay.
But
You're
a lot of
being
people would
videotaped.
say that's something that should be confronted.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, it would be tricky.
It would be. It would be. It would be.
Then I'd say, go and talk to the pastor, please. Well, I'm with Jeanette, pass the buck. But you know what? Ultimately, it has to be brought up, and you need to be in the situation with it.
Yeah,
You don't want to be, but you have to be,
yeah.
because it's going to come back to you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm just saying.
Well, and it's,
Where we used it in Wisconsin was when Jim met with a woman, she wanted to meet in the afternoon after hours, I would go and sit outside the office with earbuds in and knit, so that I couldn't hear anything, but I was the witness that nothing funny was going on. So we used that a lot.
yeah.
We used it here a couple times too.
Well, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. I don't hear, I just listen and I just look and knit.
So we get to the point where the one-on-one meeting didn't work, so we have to take witnesses, we have to take somebody in authority maybe. And if they still refuse to listen, you've got to take it to the whole church. And if they refuse to listen to even the whole church, then you've got to treat them as a pagan or a tax collector and excommunicate them from the church.
Oh gosh, that would be horrible.
And that's happened in some churches. Usually what happens in that case is you call your district superintendent, you explain the situation to them, and then the district superintendent would meet with the pastor and that person and say, okay, you can no longer come to this church. But that's in a very extreme situation where you have somebody who's just being combative, not good for the church body, and that person has to leave. Luckily, I've never been in that situation, and I hope I'm never in that situation. And then Jesus tells them in verse 18, whatever you decide when you go through this process is going to be binding. So just make sure